for January. Welcome everybody to the Transportation Advisory Board meeting for January 8th, 2024. Before we begin our matters, we will turn it over to Sydney for the technical rules this evening.
Okay, thank you for attending the Transportation Advisory Board meeting. To strike a balance between meaningful, transparent engagement and online security, the following rules will be applied for this meeting. This meeting has been called to conduct the business of the City of Boulder. Activities that disrupt, delay, or otherwise interfere with the meeting are prohibited. The time for speaking or asking questions will be limited to 3 minutes. No person shall speak except when recognized by the person presiding, and no person shall speak for longer than the time allotted. Each person shall register to speak at the meeting using that person's real name. No video will be permitted except for city officials, employees, and invited speakers and presenters. The person presiding at the meeting shall enforce these rules by muting anyone who violates any rule. The Q&A function is enabled and will be used for individuals to communicate with the host. It should only be used for technical online platform-related questions. Only the host and individuals designated by the host will be permitted to share their screen during this meeting.
Thank you, Sydney. With that, we'll move to agenda item 3, which is the approval of minutes. We have both minutes from our October and November meetings. Do any members of TAB have any edits they would like to make to the minutes as they are now? Not seeing any. Can we get a motion to approve both months as they are?
I move to approve the October and November minutes.
Thanks, Becky. Trini with a second. All those in favor? Passes unanimously with 4 votes. Thanks. Before we begin public comment, we want to pause to acknowledge that this year we're beginning with another fatality on within our transportation system. I think it's always good to have as much information as possible before we or members of the public speak to the matter. So I believe Danley offered to provide up whatever the latest information is. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to her.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Just appreciate you wanting to raise this up to the beginning of the meeting. Yeah, we definitely, it's been on our minds and certainly just heavy over the last week since the tragic crash occurred. So, I mean, I think just starting off with the person who was killed, Virginia Knowlton, she was a 90-year-old woman and she was struck by a driver at Broadway and Alpine. I think we all kind of have the same details that we're working with. The investigation is obviously ongoing. We know she was crossing the east leg of the intersection when the driver was heading southbound and making a left turn, and the driver hit her, and she later died at the hospital. So we are continuing to, we'll be in touch with BPT as we learn more, and certainly can keep you all updated as well. We have reached out to them just to coordinate on if there was anything that could have been correctable from an operations and maintenance standpoint immediately, and there hasn't been anything identified at this point. The team kind of spent some time reflecting on just the work that we have planned coming up this year that would address some of the kind of engineering and signal improvements at this intersection, and then also, more widespread across the city. And we're prepared to just say a little bit about that tonight, but I can hold off on those details if there's questions or just other comments that want to be made at this point before I share that information.
Any members of the board have anything before we hear that info?
I'd like to say a couple things on the crash, but I think I'd like to hear, I'd be interested in hearing the additional detail from Natalie prior, if that works out.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So, as you all know, we've been working on our left turn phasing improvements across the city over the last several years. This location was identified in our Safer Signals and Safer Streets project, which is funded by DRCOG, the Safer Main Streets grant, to receive signal improvements, which include the installation of a 4-section flashing yellow arrow signal head on the southbound approach to provide for left turn phasing changes. And this work is expected to be implemented this summer. And the left turn phasing will be determined using the current left turn phasing guidelines, which I know there's discussion about that we've talked about in the past, that there's a need to look at those guidelines. And we plan to do that this year as well. So the Safer Signals and Safer Streets grant is more than just this location. Of course, we have, you know, a whole list of other locations that we can share with you. And then as I said, a major focus this year through the Vision Zero action plan is to address our crossing treatment installation guidelines, our left turn and right turn signal phasing, the leading ped intervals and accessible pedestrian signals, right turn on red, and then of course our speed limit setting and signing project that's already underway. So those things are all priority work items for us this year through the Vision Zero action plan. And we'll continue on that work in the coming months. And I can just wrap up and then, you know, give it over to you, and then I know we can get to public comment, but you know, we obviously recognize that any loss of life is tragic and preventable. And as I said, you know, over the last week, this has definitely been just heavy on our mind. I know it's been heavy on the whole leadership team and management, but also just staff that work on this every day. And it really is obviously important to them, and it's why we're doing the work that we do. So we're also super grateful. We recognize that the work that we do is in partnership with organizations like It Could Be Me and Families for Safe Streets and Community Cycles. So we appreciate those partnerships. And, you know, I think for me, the most important thing that I was talking to Valerie about kind of earlier or late last week and earlier and today is just that, you know, we do really believe and trust that using our kind of strategic safe system approach and following that is going to be the way that we most quickly and thoughtfully get to zero on our roads, right? So I think, you know, it's easy to want to make kind of rash decisions in the moment. And I just, for me, it's super important to come back to a bit of that like centerpiece of we need to continue on our work with a safe system approach. So I'll just leave it at that and take any comments or questions. And the team is here tonight. Veronica's here from operations and Valerie's here to help answer questions. Devin had a personal commitment, so he wasn't able to be here tonight, but.
Tila?
Thank you. Thanks, Natalie. And thanks for the update on all of those items that you mentioned that were priorities in the Vision Zero action plan are going to be something that staff is going to be looking at in this work this year on this year's work plan. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, I was really curious about the signal guidelines because we haven't really touched on those for a long time. I do not recall why the hardened center line that we did just a couple of blocks from this location at North and Broadway got removed. And I'm wondering if there was some operational reason it got taken out, or whether that is among the tools in the box that staff might be reaching for as they're looking at the left and right turns kind of item here.
That is a good question. I'll look to, there's Veronica or Valerie are prepared to speak to that tonight.
As I recall, it got put in after a couple of, I think, injuries, certainly not fatal crashes, but several injury crashes with a left turning vehicle, I think turning from Broadway onto westbound north. And so that hardened center line was put on Broadway, but then it just disappeared after a couple months.
Yeah, I'm not sure if anyone here has that information tonight, but we
Okay.
can certainly go back and look into that.
I
Okay,
believe in 2019, had the highest absolute number of pet-involved crashes at an intersection, and the center line was identified through the Vision Zero Innovation Program
mhm,
as a treatment. However, during turning analysis of vehicles, it was determined that some vehicles wouldn't be able to make the turn without hitting the part that's designed to not be hit. So like most cars could have made it, but whatever the design vehicle was limited by the narrow North Street, I believe.
So as part of BZIP, is that what I heard you say?
I think it
If I
was, yeah,
remember
as I
correctly.
recall, Liv was behind that one. Okay, then, and if I could just one more on here, you said that this location had already been tagged through Dr. Cog grant for safer signals, and that the plan is to carry on with that work, but install a left flashing yellow for left turns for all approaches. Is there any consideration of instead going to protected left turn phasing at this location or other nearby locations on Broadway? It's, you know, it's pretty heavily pedestrianized area. We've seen the need from other crash trends just along this short section of Broadway for kind of better and more controlled turning movements. And so I'm curious why we're looking at left flashing yellow as opposed to full protection.
Yeah, Valerie, I know you've had a little bit of conversation with Devin on this. Do you want to speak to this a little bit?
Yeah, that was the treatment that was identified in the grant submission through the Dr. Cog grant. And I think, you know, that would be what would be installed with those grant funds. But I think as Natalie mentioned earlier, we are going to be revisiting those guidelines as part of our Vision Zero action plan efforts. And so at a future time, we could revisit that intersection and see if our, you know, potentially updated guidelines in the future could be re-examined there and other upgrades done in a future time.
Can I just clarify while we're talking about guidelines, what document we're talking about?
Yes. I can make sure we're using the correct, and Veronica, feel free to.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're all referring to the same piece of work.
Mhm. I believe it's our traffic upper.
They're internal guidelines that are used to help make decisions on a case-by-case location basis. It's really an internal document for staff.
Is this not the same document that was shared with TAB?
Yeah.
Joe Paulson authored, and that it was basically left as a draft.
Mhm.
But it was shared with
That's the
TAB maybe
one
3
that
years ago.
that's the one I am thinking of, Tila.
Okay. Do you know if there's been any revision of those since they were shared with TAB?
No, they have not been revised
Okay.
since they were shared with TAB. Yeah,
Great.
and that's what we're speaking
Gotcha.
to when we're saying that we're going to be updating those.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, those documents have been revised on October 2018. So if that's around the time frame
That's the
when you
one.
guys received it.
Yeah.
Becky?
Thanks. I think most of what I had to say was covered between what Natalie and Tila said, but I just want to reiterate, because I've received some questions about, you know, like clarifying, you know, why these crashes happen, what we know about them, and what the sort of direct path is to fixing them. And I think that Vision Zero action plan, as Natalie described, lays out, and the work in it, you know, lays out a lot of the how we're going to address this kind of crash. And you also both spoke to different risk factors here, like the lack of a protection on the left turn and the high pedestrian activity. And also, I just want to note, we know that Broadway is a fairly wide road in general for where it goes in the north through, well, really from top to bottom of the city. It's a pretty big road considering that it's going through a bunch of residential areas, and particularly in this area, medium density housing and places to walk to, and ideally a place that'd be great because you can walk to all these stores and restaurants, but because you have to cross this really pretty big road, and especially if people are coming downhill from the north, you know, it just encourages them to go faster. That's also just going to be an ongoing risk factor too. So I hope, you know, in the long term, we can make Broadway, you know, think about a 4-to-3 conversion or something that will make Broadway more of a reflect the kind of neighborhoods that it's passing through in the city. But in the shorter term, I am really excited about that work and the Vision Zero action plan. And one of my questions had been whether this intersection was part of that. So it's great to hear that has been identified for that work. So thank you. And I did have one question about the federal grant that the city received for the Vision Zero action plan. Is it does that change like the timeline in the Vision Zero action plan, or does it change this like the number of locations that will be addressed for different kinds of work? Maybe that's intersection specific. I know there's many other kinds of work in there too. I'm just curious how that grant would changes sort of the landscape of what can be done for some of these kinds of improvements.
Yeah, I can speak to that briefly, and then Valerie, feel free to add to it. So there are essentially what the grant allows us to do is to basically move forward on a lot of the actions in the Vision Zero action plan that we didn't have identified funding to move forward on at this point. So we had kind of a bucket of signal improvements or intersection improvements that we identified in the grant that were from the action plan that we identified as projects that we could move forward with if we were funded. And so that's kind of one bucket. There's essentially 4 buckets of work. The intersection improvements is one. The corridors like East Arapahoe and 30th is another. The demonstration project is another. And I'm missing the 4th. What's our 4th bucket, Valerie?
It's a suite of pedestrian crossing improvements.
That's right, the pedestrian crossings. So that's like, and we'll obviously share more as we just start to kind of coalesce around what that looks like as a department. But those are kind of the 4 buckets that we identified in the application.
Great, thank you.
Trini?
I just wanted, well, thank you for all the information that you shared, Natalie. And I just wanted to really commend you guys for applying for this grant and then congratulate you for getting this grant. I know that this money is something that we really needed, and it is going to save a lot of lives. So thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of work. I know it was a lot of work. So thanks on behalf of everyone.
Looking at the Alpine intersection, it looks like the signal mast arms are long enough that that's where the protected yellow will be installed at some point. Is that correct?
I'm not sure about the like current mast arms versus.
Okay, I was out there today and it looked like it extended more than halfway across the roadway in a way that would indicate that it was like the existing signals don't use the whole arm. The arm continues a ways out. So it appears as though there's the space to install the protected yellow. I'd be curious if your internal guidelines, I mean, we'd protect more lefts if we could. Sometimes it's a matter of how long that mast arm is. In this case, it seems like we're fortunate that the mast arm is long. Do you know if the internal guidelines would make it so that that left is going to be protected at all times once the upgrades are done?
I don't have the answer to that question, but that's something we can get back to you on.
Okay, I think that's something that could provide a great amount of reassurance in the aftermath of this crash if the guidelines are such that it's just a matter of implementing something that's been studied and flagged as an opportunity. And if the guidelines aren't such that it guarantees that that left will be protected all of the time, I think that's even more reason to look into updating those guidelines and can serve as like a certain threshold we're trying to achieve in conditions like this. Any other discussion regarding Virginia's death? Okay. I guess with that, we can turn back to our original agenda and open things up for public comment. Any member of the public wishing to address the board on a transportation related matter can use the raise hand feature within the Zoom platform. You'll have up to 3 minutes to do so, and our technical host will call on you once it's your turn.
Yeah. So Lynn, it looks like you're up first. I'm going to allow you to talk, and you should be able to unmute yourself, and I'll start your time.
First, I have a suggestion on the 90-year-old situation. And what reminds me of this is my recent situation, which you probably read about, that I had a laptop bag stolen by a city employee in the municipal lobby 15 seconds after I removed my computer from it. 15 seconds and 4 feet from me. Now, I will never know. This happened September 14th, and I will never know what happened. The guy was let off. He said it was his supervisor's bag and handed it to her. She accepted it, and then she set it down outside in the south entrance when there was a fire alarm. So I have a problem more with the supervisor than the employee, who is not working there now. He can work there now, but he had some kind of a traumatic reaction, a panic attack, something. Now, what happened with this 90-year-old woman is a trauma to the community. It's a trauma to me. I live nearby here. When you've got alpine balsam building up so big, you're going to have so much more activity in that area. And what I recommend, and what I'm recommending for my situation, is restorative justice. I want to talk to the guy. He doesn't have to talk to me. I don't want to put him down. Actually, I sent him a letter empathizing with him in every way, but I am sequestered from him. And that's the problem. We are all sequestered from each other. And what we need with this 90-year-old woman is we need a site visit down there. We need to get some of the planning people on the board and staffers to go to that intersection, reenact what happened, and go over how the rules operate and what could have possibly happened there, and include the woman who's probably worse traumatized than anything because she's still living, and her 2 kids that ran into her. Like, her life is completely upended, I'm sure now. I mean, this is a major trauma for the community. And yet it's just like, oh, it happened and we'll do any improvements we can, but we don't know what actually happened. Maybe we never will, but I think if the community is there on site and sees, maybe they can have a better feeling for how transportation works in the city and what the real risks are of just not preventative stuff like preventative development, which I'm always supporting, which is like things like, I think you should be involved in 2206 Pearl, where they're wanting parking reductions because they've got 300 square foot units there for, I'll tell you, $1,700 to $2,600 a month. That's 80 to 120% AMI for the missing middle. And yet no parking is involved with that. Across the street at Whittier,
Thanks, Lynn.
you know, it's just.
Thanks for joining us tonight, Lynn. Any other members of the public wishing to speak, please use the raise hand feature. If not, I'll go ahead and close public comment. I
think that's it.
Okay. That brings us to agenda item 5. We don't have any public hearings or matters or full agenda items tonight. So looks like quite a few matters from staff. So I'll turn it over to Natalie for those.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so I was going to take just a few minutes to comment or provide an update for you all related to Baseline and Mohawk. And that'll just take a few minutes and I can answer any questions about that in case you all are hearing anything from community members. And then we'll move into our regional transportation planning update, which Gene Sanson is here for. So let me just pull up my notes to speak to Baseline and Mohawk. So we, as you all are aware, we had completed our phase 1 baseline road transportation projects as part of the CAN initiative. And phase 2 design will be kicking off this year. As we completed phase 1, we were hearing some feedback from cyclists using the intersection, using the protected intersection, that they were having essentially just a hard time seeing some of the infrastructure that we had installed. So we added just last week, late last week, we added some additional delineators around the corner islands on both the southwest and northeast corners to basically just help clarify the path of travel for people biking and driving through the intersection. But really what we were hearing were from cyclists. So I think hopefully what we've done will just make it more clear for people to understand kind of what the path of travel is. It's been interesting. It seems like the folks that we've heard from, the speeds at which they're kind of traveling through the intersection just made it so they weren't seeing what was lower to the ground. So we're hoping the vertical delineators will just help. But that's essentially where we're at this point. As far as the installation, we'll obviously continue to monitor it and see how things are going. But wanted to provide that update and just answer any questions if you all had been hearing anything.
Tila?
Thanks. I was looking for my raised hand thing and I couldn't find it in time. From what I understood from some of the colloquy, Natalie, and your response to community cycles on this issue, it sounded like and I might have just been misreading the email. That's why I'm asking for clarification here. It sounded like a goal of those little turtles, whatever they were, and sort of making the curving movements by cars, the turning movements a little bit more complicated, was to slow basically everybody down at the intersection. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. Is slowing users down at intersections sort of a new technique that we're trying? Is this, reflecting, because no, a normal car driver, their standard experience over the last 10 years has just been carry on. If the light is green, then I carry on at speed. I suppose turning movements, you do want them to slow down anyway, but you're talking about slowing down even through cyclists, I think.
Well, so I think it's not necessarily, I think slowing down through cyclists, mostly from the standpoint of as they approach an intersection, that they're aware of, what's going on. I ride quite a bit out on the roads. And so as I approach intersections, I usually do slow down a little bit because I don't trust that cars are doing what they're supposed to.
Well, because you're a defensive cyclist.
Yeah, right. But yeah, so I think the idea is mostly they're there to slow turning vehicles, right? Like that was the intention.
Okay.
But also the expectation is that the delineator helps people just have that visual cue of, okay, there's something here and I need to be more cautious as I move through this intersection. So I think it kind of serves dual purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Valerie, is there more that you wanted to? Oh, sorry, I thought I saw Valerie on here, but.
Yeah, and I guess my only reaction to that is, it might not be clear, and the geometry is helping, I think, and the delineators are helping that to be clear that is a change in expectation.
Right.
I don't mean to suggest that it's incorrect, especially if we see crash trends, but I do want to avoid putting the onus on the more vulnerable road user to change their behavior. I have a problem with asking people to be defensive riders and defensive walkers because I think they don't carry the burden of care. So, but that being said, our roundabouts, our smaller roundabouts, say on Pine and on Balsam, those have the effect of making everyone slow down because you got to go around the thing. And that's sort of a logical consequence of the geometry. So I'm just kind of making sure that we have our sort of priorities in the right place in terms of who we expect to carry the burden of being more careful.
Yeah, and I'd say the primary intent is to slow vehicles.
Anything else on baseline from TAP? Okay, not seen any.
Great. Then we will move on to the regional transportation update. Go ahead and Jean, take it away.
Thank you, Natalie, and good evening, members of TAB. I'm Jean Sanson, a Principal Transportation Planner with the Department of Transportation Mobility, and it's nice to see you all. Happy New Year. I'm going to take a minute and share my screen. Hey, are you all seeing a presenting screen? Great. Okay, wonderful. So on the regional transportation front, we have a lot to celebrate. And as usual, I think I always have the same message. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Coming out of the COVID pandemic, the trends in the region are moving the wrong way. In the Denver region, VMT is up. It's been up since 2021. Based on that, we're working very closely with our regional partners here in the Northwest metro area to reverse those trends and provide good, solid regional transportation alternatives to our community members. When you look across the metro area, Boulder stands out as one of the premier regional job centers. And one of the many reasons is that, and that's one of the many reasons that it's incumbent on us to offer safe, convenient, and reliable alternatives to single occupant vehicle travel through the Northwest metro area. And so this evening, I'm going to briefly share progress on 4 important initiatives listed here that are helping us to meet our goals of providing these regional travel options I mentioned, and improving safety and moving us closer to reaching our climate targets. Note that the corridors listed here and shown on the map are all part of a consensus agreement with local governments reached 10 years ago now, known as the Northwest Area Mobility Study, or NAMS. NAMS has been and continues to be our vision for improving mobility throughout the region. So let's get started looking at Colorado 119. So starting with the diagonal corridor connecting Boulder with Longmont, I'm pleased to share that over $160 million has been secured for this project. Kramer North America has been selected as a construction manager, general contractor, and construction is expected to begin in fall 2024. As shown here, the CO119 Safety and Mobility Improvements Project will include, or the primary features will include, bus rapid transit, a commuter bikeway, and important intersection safety improvements. Now, while I won't read this list in detail, I wanted to share the number and types of improvements included in the overall project. It's a lot, right? Ranging from full reconfiguration of major intersections to enhance safety and manage congestion, to a fully separated commuter bikeway and transit priority or Q bypass lanes. Combined, these projects will provide greater transportation options and safety for people using all modes of travel, and will provide a critical link to the city's 28th Street Improvement Project, which is now underway. So much of the community engagement, as I'm sure you've been aware over the last several months, has focused on providing opportunities for community members to provide input and feedback on the design of the commuter bikeway. And more recently, you may have heard community members discussing proposed changes to unsignalized intersections, which in some cases will change access onto and off of the diagonal highway for neighboring residents. And why are we doing this? Well, the frequency and severity of crashes at these locations, these 5 specifically, particularly broadside crashes, necessitate these improvements, which include either restricting access to right-in and right-out only, as shown on the above concept plan, or installing flashing stop signs from median access points onto the highway. Taken together, these improvements are meant to eliminate and or reduce crash frequencies and severity at these locations and are intended to be in the first package of improvements constructed this year, given how important the safety benefits of these projects will be. Now, while this Colorado 119 project has been many years in the making, the tragic death of a vulnerable road user occurred along the Diagonal Highway late last year when we lost cyclist Magnus White to a crash. Not wanting to wait until full project construction, CDOT took the important step of installing rumble strips along the outside shoulder of the Diagonal Highway in November of last year. These rumble strips are out there today. They provide a warning to drivers when they're entering the shoulder and have been put down in locations where cyclists can use the shoulders without having to ride over them. The rumble strips are also accompanied by signage that alerts drivers to bicyclists using the shoulder. So next steps for this project, and it's a big one as we've seen from that long list, include refining the design of the improvements as needed, developing construction packages, and a phasing plan with construction expected to begin late next year and continue into 2026. So obviously with the magnitude of something this large, it will be phased over the course of 2 years. We at the City of Boulder are also working closely with RTD to revisit the BRT service plans into and through Boulder to ensure that we're providing adequate access to CU's main campus. And Commuting Solutions is leading a BRT branding and wayfinding study that will be kicking off shortly that we'll be participating in, much as we did before we rolled out the Flatiron Flyer and the opening of the 36th commuter bikeway. We also continue to work with RTD to refine station designs within the City of Boulder and look for opportunities to implement transit signal priority for faster and more reliable travel times on our local streets. So that is all things 119. Now I'm going to switch gears to Colorado 7. So as you may recall, we had a conversation with you all back in September about the CDOT design project currently underway to refine the East Arapahoe concept plan and develop a 15% design set for East Arapahoe. Based on your feedback and input from community members, we're continuing to refine these designs and plans and should have updates for you in the spring. But for this evening, we'd like to zoom out a bit and provide more of a regional context to the work that connects to these plan improvements in Boulder. What we're looking at on this map is a program of projects that are part of the CO7 Corridor Development Plan and are either in design, construction, or soon to be in construction along Colorado 7. And while much of this corridor is still in the early design phases, there are several projects, such as safety and intersection improvements, to be constructed at 95th Street and 109th Street in Lafayette, and corridor reconstruction between Sheridan and I-25 in Broomfield that are happening this year and next. Another project of regional significance will be construction of an interim mobility hub at I-25 that will include a new park and ride and serve the regional BRT starter service that will begin operating between Brighton and Boulder in 2026. To make this presentation even more complicated, wait, sorry. I have a frog in my throat. We have, it's not going away. We have a number of projects in the City of Boulder that we're continuing to coordinate and move forward as plans are finalized and funding is secured. I think you all have seen this graphic before, but for example, what it shows is that we expect to begin construction of the multi-use path and transit stop enhancement project between 38th and Marine Streets and Cherryvale Road later this year. And then once we've completed the 15% design set for the East Arapahoe corridor, we will then move into final design for the western segment from 28th Street to Foothills Parkway. And while CDOT is managing the 15% design set now, we, the City of Boulder staff, will be managing the final design. And as was mentioned earlier in this meeting, through the Safe Streets and Roads for All federal funding, we now have secured nearly $10 million for safety improvements along Arapahoe, including bicycle and pedestrian improvements between 28th Street and 33rd Street, which also includes the protected intersection at Arapahoe and 30th Street. We also expect the CDOT overlay project to begin this year or next and are expecting to stripe transit-only lanes in conjunction with this resurfacing. So I hope with these two slides, I've given you a sense of how the work that we're doing at the west end of the corridor connects to the important work that's happening all along the length of Colorado 7. The next project I'd like to share is the South Boulder Road Corridor Study. So this is a 9-mile corridor that connects Boulder, Louisville, and Lafayette. And if you remember, is one of the NAMS corridors and maybe one of the last to go into planning and design. So as you can imagine, we're very much at a high level of visioning. The Denver Regional Council of Governments, as part of its corridor planning program, is leading the study in partnership with ourselves at the city, Boulder County, Lafayette, Louisville, and RTD. The goal of the study is, as I mentioned, to develop a shared vision for the corridor by identifying current safety and mobility challenges and future opportunities to make the corridor more accessible for all users. The project is being led by the consultant team of Fair and Peers, and helping to guide the process is a steering committee that includes Trini and Becky. So thank you for your service and your helpful input. As this project kicks off, there will be several opportunities for our community to get involved in helping to shape the study, including the opportunities shown here. There's an online survey that's going to be open through mid-February. A virtual public meeting is being held January 24th, and we're going to have a pop-up event at the East Boulder Rec Center on January 27th. That's a Saturday. As you can see from the schedule, the study process is fairly brief. And by this summer, we should have a clear vision for what our communities would like South Boulder Road to be and how it should function into the future, as well as a list of actionable programs and projects to get us there in the near, mid, and long term. Also, with the study in hand, next year, Boulder County, with TIP funding, will lead a study of potential bus rapid transit enhancements for the corridor. So more to come as the study progresses, and we'd very much appreciate if you'd help spread the word about upcoming engagement opportunities with your friends and colleagues and neighbors. All right, moving on. The final regional project I'd like to provide just a brief update on is the Northwest Rail Peak Service Study. You've seen information on this before, but what I wanted to just remind you all today is that this study is identifying the requirements, the costs, and operational needs to upgrade existing railroad tracks, develop rail stations, in our case, that would be Boulder Junction and Depot Square, and provide peak service that would extend the B line, which currently operates between Denver Union Station and Westminster Station at 72nd Avenue, to downtown Westminster, Broomfield, Louisville, Boulder, and Longmont, as you can see on the map. The peak service would operate 3 trains into Denver in the morning and 3 trains out of Denver in the evening, and passenger trains would share the BNSF track with freight trains essentially pulling over and parking while commuter rail passenger trains are operating. While this study advances, it's becoming more and more clear that there are exciting opportunities to make Northwest Rail a reality by partnering with agencies like the Front Range Passenger Rail District. Last month, the Front Range Passenger Rail District learned that they'd been accepted into the Federal Railroad Administration's Corridor Identification and Development Program, or ID program. This is a relatively new federal program to identify and develop passenger rail corridors between cities. The program is intended to create a pipeline of projects that help carry them from ideas through planning and implementation, and is an important step to advancing rail between Fort Collins and Pueblo, with one leg being the Northwest Rail alignment between Denver, Boulder, and Longmont. The Front Range Passenger Rail District is currently advancing a comprehensive service development plan, which they expect to complete in 2024. And as of now, Governor Polis is keen to go to the ballot in 2024 to ask voters for funding. That was a lot. So I'm going to pause here, try to get this frog out of my throat. Thank you, and ask if you have any questions.
Tila?
Thank you. Dean, I'm assuming that for the South Boulder Road project that the city already has like a project website up. And that's where we would find all the upcoming public engagement stuff.
Yes, well, we don't. DRCOG does.
Thank you.
They just created the website, and what we will be doing here is creating a link from our webpage to their site.
So DRCOG is hosting the site. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else for Jean? Not see anything. Thanks, Jean.
Yeah, thank you, Jean, for all your work. It's amazing and so exciting to see all these things kind of take shape and come to fruition.
Thank you. We couldn't do it without TAP support, so thank you.
And Jean's not going away. She has another. She's another item.
Give me a second to pull up. This one's much shorter, I promise. Okay. And before I get going, I just wanted to share that we are also joined this evening by Carl Geiler and Charles Farrow from our Planning and Development Services, because they are our partners in helping to guide and shape and have conversations with legislators and the governor's office related to these upcoming bills. Unfortunately, Carl Castillo, our chief policy advisor, had a conflict and couldn't be here this evening. But just wanted to share a little bit of context as I speak about these upcoming bills, because it really does take a team from the city to help analyze these and understand how they do or don't fit with the city's policy issues or policy statements, I should say, and priorities. It's an evolving conversation, much of which we're just looking at draft bills at the moment, some of which we don't even have drafted yet, but know they're coming. So I'm going to share what we do know. We do know that a bill will be introduced, a proposed law that would require drivers of vehicles that are more likely to kill vulnerable road users to help pay for infrastructure projects to prevent pedestrian and cyclist crashes. This has been in the news quite a bit. I'm sure that you all are aware of this. What it would entail would be a vehicle registration fee paid for by vehicles that are passenger cars, trucks, and SUVs, not commercial vehicles, and they would include electric vehicles, which is an important point because many of the electric vehicles that are out on the market are as heavy, if not heavier, than their counterpart sized vehicles. This would be set up in an enterprise fund. It would raise up to $20 million per year, and it would apply to the 12 most populous counties in the state, with the rationale being that most of the deaths are happening in these counties. And I guess politically, I think it's a way to ensure that this moves forward and advances. CPR did a quick analysis, and I mentioned that these are vehicle registration fees, and they would be assessed on a scale based on how heavy the vehicle is. So, for example, a RAV4 SUV would be charged an additional $4.50 a year, and a Hummer would be charged an additional $29.90 per year. And again, these are mostly, the funds aren't huge, right? $20 million to be spread across 12 counties. You can imagine they're not huge projects. They'll likely be small scale projects. And we're working to understand what types of projects would be eligible and help guide that, such that they really do work for the communities and they're not onerous grants, if you will, to be able to implement and put in place quickly. And I'm happy to pause here, Tila, because your hand is up. Oh, okay. It's a leftover hand. All right. So let me keep moving forward. So the next bill that we see moving forward is an RTD, or Transit Authority Fare and Reform bill. There are a couple components to this, some of which is a little bit unknown at this point, but we do know that there will be an ask made to include free fare or youth fare in the ongoing general fund to support the free fare month during the summer ozone season and the year-round youth pass. So as you know, the youth pass, which is just terrific and is having great successes, is a pilot program. And so the idea being that the state would take it over and it would continue into in perpetuity. And then there's a RTD reform bill, which is a little bit more nebulous, but the idea being here that the bill would look at things like the composition of the current RTD board, the size of the district itself. It's one of the largest transit districts in the country. Looking at things like how RTD reports on their budget and expenses and ensuring transparency, and a number of other things that are really intended to modernize and, if you will, create a structure such that RTD can avail of transit funds as they become available and use them to expand transit service in conjunction with local partners like ourselves. So I know I'm a little bit vague here. That's because we still kind of don't know what all the sausage is that's going into this bill, but we will keep you posted. And then another bill that's received quite a bit of press lately is what's being called the Transit-Oriented Communities Bill. And I can speak to you know, some of the information that's up here. And I think that it would be great to have Carl.
Hey, Jean,
Charles.
we
Yeah.
aren't seeing, I didn't realize you like were actually showing us slides. We
What?
aren't seeing, we're just seeing the thank you slide from the last presentation.
Yeah, I tried to send you a note, Jean.
Oh no.
Sorry,
Sorry.
I didn't realize you were like going through this.
All right. Let me fix this. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay, but it seems like the transit-oriented one is probably one we want to see, so we can.
Okay, good. I'm glad you stopped me then. Okay. All right. I'm gonna start over. Share screen.
There we go.
Okay. Are you seeing the transit-oriented communities
We
bill?
are.
Oh, good. I'm so sorry. So as you remember, you know, there was a land use bill at the state legislature that really went down in flames last year. And the idea this year is to convene local governments and stakeholders to have a conversation about what will be palatable in terms of, you know, creating more carrots than sticks and not necessarily mandates, if you will, to ensure that, you know, zoning and density is built in such a way that's affordable, and it's built in conjunction with high frequency transit. So I'm not going to read each one of these, but you know, essentially the carrot being that there would be approximately $30 million in tax credits for affordable housing and about the same amount in transit-oriented communities infrastructure funds. Unfortunately, at this point, I don't believe any of that funding would include things like transit service per se, but it would include things like infrastructure, harder infrastructure services like water, sewer, etc. And then again, this is all kind of taking shape as, you know, as the days go on. And I know Charles and Carl and others are on calls with the governor's office weekly as this to help shape this bill. But the sticks, essentially, communities would have approximately 2 years to ensure that their zoning allows for higher densities near high frequency transit. And if they're not able to meet that requirement, then they may withhold transportation funds, or they might impose a state housing goal for non-compliant local governments. And that's sort of the essence of this transit-oriented communities bill. But there are other separate land use bills that I thought you all might be interested in as they relate to parking and housing densities, and those being, there's a bill, I'm not sure how, you know, if it has legs, but it would ban minimum parking requirements in communities, and another that would ban cities from barring accessible dwelling units. And there are a couple other related bills. So I will stop and maybe hand this over to the experts, or pause and ask if there are questions and let the experts answer them.
Jean, can you back up to the slide showing the vulnerable road user bill stuff with the vehicle registration fee, since I didn't get to see it? There you go.
Ah, there it is.
Yeah, so these are already kind of proposed by legislators? Help me understand what level of
Yeah.
like the process they're at.
Yeah. There is a draft bill. It's our understanding that they want to introduce, Senator Connor wants to introduce the bill very early in the session. So I would say that the draft bill is pretty well baked, and I can provide an online link to that bill if you'd like.
I can search for it online as well.
Okay.
But I hadn't heard about it. Thank you.
Oh, good. Okay, I'm glad that we could share this information. And what's interesting is that we would be the first state in the country to impose such a fee just for funds dedicated to safety improvements for vulnerable road users.
Attorney?
Well, and that's outstanding and that's amazing, Jean. I just wanted to ask, I know that there's a bill floating around right now, with it's hands-free. Do you know if we're gonna be able to support that? So I know it's been on the table for many sessions, but I think that now is a really good time to push for that, given the automated traffic enforcement success. And a lot of the same issues were the arguments were very, very similar for both bills. So I think, I don't know, maybe talk to Carl.
I know, yes, it is one of those that bills that gets reintroduced over and over again, Trini. I haven't heard anything related to that. Natalie, I don't know if you have, but what I can do is follow up with Carl.
Yeah, because I know Bicycle Colorado is doing a lot of work on that.
Okay.
So
Yeah, we typically, we have our state and federal lobbyists that keep us, tracking these things, and our state lobbyists give us kind of ongoing updates. And I don't think I'd seen that one come through, so maybe it just isn't far enough along yet that it's on the radar. But yeah, it would be interesting to learn more about that.
all right, that's all I've got. Thanks.
Becky?
Yeah, thanks for this overview. It's really helpful. So these are bills that that are being tracked, but council hasn't necessarily weighed in. Is that right? Okay.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Once
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Once a bill is introduced, then the city will or will not take a position as it pertains to our policy agenda.
And I think council is going to be briefed in a couple weeks on the upcoming legislative session. The date escapes me, but I can look for it while we're talking.
Gotcha. Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for bringing those kind of land use related bills to our attention too. Definitely kind of interested in following those, and it's helpful to be able to keep an eye on those so we can advocate for those to the council too. If there are things that TAB feels is something they want to support, or that are in line with things that we recommend. In particular, there's this paper I love that came out like within the last year that takes a public health approach to traffic safety and argues that the most foundational thing that can be done is reforming land use so that people can live closer to where they need to go, because it reduces their exposure by reducing their VMT. It reduces their exposure to traffic risk. So I think of that paper a lot. So anyway, that's anyway, I just appreciate you bringing those additional bills to our attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky.
Thanks. Any other comments or questions on the legislative efforts? Okay, maybe on to the next matter.
Great. Thanks, Jean. Thanks, Carl and Charles, for being here as well.
So much.
All right, the next item. We have an update from Daniel and Garrett are here to provide an update on the pavement management program this year.
Good evening, and I will wait for Daniel to get our presentation up, and there we go. So we are here to just provide an update on some efforts that are taking place with the pavement management program. For the record, my name is Garrett Slater, Principal Transportation Projects Engineer, joined by Daniel Sheeter, who will introduce himself in just a moment as a planner here, working on this effort as well. So if we could go to the next slide, Daniel. As you all are aware, we talk about the pavement management program every year as part of the development and the recommendation we ask for from TAB as part of the capital improvement program. The pavement management program is a major part of our annual CIP, and it's a major part of that because we have some goals and objectives of taking care of the assets that we have under our care. And of course, street pavement is a major part of that. And a few years ago, we looked to incorporate ways to make mobility enhancements in conjunction with the pavement management program. And that was a change where previously we were looking at this purely as capital maintenance. Through some input from TAB as well as other concerned community members, we recognized that there were greater opportunities to make changes to the streets as we are going in and repaving them, to look for opportunities to improve mobility and safety for all the folks who are using these streets. And you've seen examples of that on some of the streets such as Lehigh, as well as Balsam. And Moorhead is one that's coming into focus as part of the pavement management program this year. And Moorhead is up for pavement in 2024 between 27th and Table Mesa. And when we have the opportunity to make these enhancements, it's not like a traditional capital project where we can do a really lengthy and robust community engagement effort. We are up against a calendar because we have about a year to get ourselves organized, historically, about a year to get ourselves organized in preparation for the work. And so we have been working actively with our pavement program manager, James Smith, to try to give us a little more time to get out ahead of that. And so the desire is to be able to try to have a couple of years of time in advance of the actual paving to be able to incorporate mobility enhancements on streets where there are opportunities to make things better for residents and users, and also in accordance with our Vision Zero plan, our low stress network plan, and the transportation master plan. So one of the things that's really great about what has happened on Moorhead is that we have taken a different approach to the way that we're administering the replacement and the enhancement of all of the concrete work that is occurring. And if you've been on Moorhead in the last couple of months, you've noticed that there's been some construction activity taking place, and that is to replace and repair poor condition curb and gutter and sidewalk, as well as make improvements to ADA ramps. Thank you, Daniel, for this slide. And interestingly, there is not a single ramp, a single curb ramp on Moorhead that is in compliance with ADA. So at the conclusion of this project, we will have upgraded several dozen ramps to bring them into compliance with ADA. But to the concrete efforts, the way that we have managed the concrete work in the past is we've relied on our on-call concrete contractors. So we have 3 on-call concrete contractors because we have no ability to perform that work with in-house staff. And we relied on those on-call contractors to perform this work. And if we could not guarantee a steady stream of work day after day after day, it made it such that particularly in the last 2 to 4 years, where contractors have had challenges with material supplies and labor shortages, they would leave town and they might not come back for 2 to 4 weeks, which really made getting all the concrete work done before the paving a major, major challenge. So this year we decided to take a different approach and do a project-specific set of concrete work projects in support of the pavement management program to make sure that we had a start and stop date by which all that concrete work would be done and not have to worry about the contractor packing up and leaving town. And so that has worked out really, really well for us, and we will plan to continue to do that in the future as part of the pavement management program. And as James and his team continue to identify all the streets that are in need of improvements, the goal is that we will be having this concrete work done a year in advance of the actual paving. So here on Moorhead, we're taking care of the concrete work. It started toward the latter part of 23, and it will be taking place through the first quarter of 24. Ideally, all this concrete work would have been done at the end of summer of 23 to give us ample time to identify all the mobility enhancements that we'd like to implement on Moorhead. So that will be that's our goal for the future, and hopefully in the next 2 or 3 years we'll get there to where we're getting that concrete work done well in advance to give us a larger time frame to work with. And so, again, I wanted to just emphasize the importance of the difference between the mobility enhancements, where it will always be a more streamlined type of effort with community engagement. We want to reach out to people and let them know what we're doing. We'd like to hear their thoughts, but it's more of a lighter touch than we would see on a traditional standalone capital project. Because of that, even with doing the concrete work a year in advance, there still would be not quite as much time as we might have on that traditional project. So we're excited about the changes and how it's all coming to fruition here on Moorhead. And I'm going to here, before I turn it over to Daniel, just one more thought. I just wanted to say you'll continue to see these concrete improvements here over the next month or so as we get ready for the paving season in late spring, early summer. So now I'll hand it over to Daniel to talk about some of the engagement efforts that have been taking place along Moorhead.
Thanks, Garrett, and good evening, members of TAB. My name is Daniel Sheeter, Principal Transportation Planner in the Transportation and Mobility Department. So the second half of this brief update is next steps for mobility enhancements on Moorhead. Per the goals of the program, coordinating enhancements with the advanced concrete work and repaving is a cost-effective and efficient way to make the street safer for everyone who uses the corridor. And Moorhead is a priority for 2024 because, as you all well know, it serves as a major connector in the bike network between Martin Acres, the US 36 Bikeway, CU Boulder, countless other destinations, as well as downtown being a major draw from the south along Moorhead. It's also an important collector serving the neighborhood and RTD Route 204, which serves Martin Acres via Moorhead. Our community engagement kicked off this past Saturday with a corridor walk to hear from the neighborhood on areas for improvement along the corridor. And we had a great turnout with 28 attendees and look forward to continuing to engage over the next few months in the neighborhood. So on to our last slide. I said it was going to be brief, which details the project schedule. So as Garrett mentioned, we're trying to complete advanced concrete work and mobility enhancements planning well ahead of the summer repaving season, but our schedule is still tight in 2024 due to contractor scheduling. So with engagement kicked off, we'll begin the mobility enhancements design in earnest, and we'll have concept designs to share with the community by early February. We also plan to come to the February TAB meeting with a second update on the Moorhead engagement and concept design. Construction of the mobility enhancements would occur in late winter, early spring, followed by repaving and restriping. And that restriping can also include some enhancements as well that will be identified through the concept design. And that would occur early this summer for the repaving and restriping, as Garrett mentioned. So more information will be shared on the PMP webpage as the project progresses. And you'll be seeing a lot of the team because a broader TAB item on the overall pavement management and mobility enhancements program is tentatively planned for March. So that concludes our update for tonight, but Garrett and I welcome any questions you have. Thank you.
Thanks, Garrett and Daniel. See, Trini has a hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. No, well, thank you so much for including this and prioritizing Moorhead. I was, that was my route as I would commute with my child. He used to be at Manhattan Middle School, and that was one of the most worrisome parts of his journey for me. And as I traveled multiple times with him, I noticed a couple of things that I think really urgently need to be fixed beyond what you guys are suggesting. I don't know exactly what the restriping, where you guys are restriping. I mean, I believe, and I would plead to please have a protected bike lane there, somehow rearrange the space. It's such a wide road that I think it lends itself to some reassignment of space. But also, like as an immediate thing, when you are traveling from Table Mesa to 27th, so if you're traveling south to north, if you want to enter the bike path, the paving, there's a protected crossing for pedestrians, So if you were to take that and cross as a cyclist, it pretty much leads you to a non-space. I have pictures of this and I will share them with you guys.
Yeah.
And so you're on the other side of the road and you're physically facing oncoming cyclist traffic for about 50 yards. So there has to be a way that we can redirect cyclists so they're safe and they're somehow acknowledged by like the oncoming traffic from its 27th way. And and the bus. So anyway, I will send over some of the pictures that I've taken because it's something that really, really worries me. And it's just at that point, it's just paint. But I really do think it's one of these places where we should have a protected bike lane of some sort. And again, there's enough space. So I know there's a lot of problems with, because I've thought about this for literally for years, and I've talked to many people about it, and I know there's a problem with the plowing, and there's all these things that have been brought up when I suggest certain things, but I guess my closing comment is just thank you for prioritizing this road, because I think it's one that serves so many people, and it's part of the bike path. I mean, you're routed onto it, as part of the bike path. So anyway, that's all I've got, but thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, and please share those pictures and comments. Yeah, send them over. Thank you.
Tila?
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I'll try to be succinct here, but I'm curious what you have in mind in terms of improving, yes, access and connectivity for cyclists coming from that kind of spur of the multi-use path that I think Trini was talking about, coming off of 27th Way and crossing 27th Way. That intersection is very difficult for cyclists and cars to co-navigate because it's just not clear where we're expecting cyclists to go. And as a related question, I'm wondering how this work is related to the plans for the Baseline West development at 2700 to 2750 Baseline Road. So right smack against that intersection, because I know people looking at the current state of affairs, which is a little bit ad hoc, would like to see something more sanctioned by the city. And again, just sort of with the geometry offering more clarity to how we expect users to go and interact with each other right around that area at the sort of the top end of Moorhead.
Yeah, thanks for that comment, Tila. We heard some of the same at the event we held on Saturday, and I think we'll be looking at ways, with striping and other kind of lighter touch design options to enhance connectivity. That's the Skunk Creek underpass you're referring to of 27th, right? That kind of
not so much the underpass as coming from the connector for the Broadway bike lane around the shopping center, and then crossing at the intersection at grade there at Baseline and 27th. I hear from novice and experienced cyclists alike that they don't really have a good plan for what to do when they get there.
So we'll be looking at, again, light touch improvements to make that more intuitive. And the project the development project you referred to, still at the concept level, but myself, Garrett, and other members of our team are reviewing that with planning and development services. And when that project moves forward, that may afford further opportunities to enhance connectivity to the paths along Baseline and under Baseline, right? Going into main campus is kind of is what you're referring to.
Yes.
Going west and east along Baseline, there's there's major underpasses in both directions. So yes, on our radar, and we'll see what we can do with the mobility enhancements, but also we'll look to coordinating with the adjacent projects as well as those move forward. So.
And I just to add one more comment to what Daniel said, Tila, there's certainly no guarantee that development will be approved. There have been others who have tried and failed in the past. So what we would want to do with the mobility enhancements is make improvements that we know will stand irrespective of whether that development moves forward, but also be mindful to not put things in place that preclude the opportunity for even further enhancements if it does come to fruition.
Okay, I guess my concern is also to make sure that our TMP and our like planning documents show a better, more clear, safer route for vulnerable road users there than what we have now. That so that is sort of open notice that we expect when the parcel gets redeveloped, it gets redeveloped properly with those users in mind. I don't have full confidence that our planning documents right now do show that.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. And yeah, and there could be items identified in the concept design effort that may inform that. We're just beginning that in earnest now, having kicked off engagement. So that's a good suggestion though, and something that we can maybe bring into the conversation with the adjacent projects.
That's great. I just, as a final parting thought on that, just want to say there is some precedent for TAB being invited to weigh in at the concept development phase of these projects before, land use decisions get made by planning board. If we need to ask for an invitation from city council to weigh in on those, it would be good to know that ahead of time instead of saying we missed the opportunity. Because I think TAB would like in this particular instance to be involved in as early as we can.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tila. Anything else on Moorhead PMP for tonight? Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Garrett and Daniel. Okay, and I believe our final item is mine tonight. Yes. Let me share my screen. I guess I should have practiced sharing my sharing my screen in Zoom before this. All right, can you see my screen? Is it in presenter mode or are you seeing notes mode?
We're in notes.
All right. Clearly I don't share PowerPoints very often. How about now?
Ta-da!
Yay, okay. So I am providing just an update on 2024 work plan. Typically, you all may remember, I guess before I show that slide so that you don't get distracted looking at that. You all may remember we typically share our kind of yearly work plan at the retreat, which is kind of funny timing because by the time we're doing that, it's usually like April, May, and we're well into the work plan. And I thought, well, it might make sense to share the work plan that's planned for 2024. We went through a pretty robust departmental development of our work plan, and then that was embedded into a citywide work plan that I'll speak to a little bit. And that is all kind of you can think feeding up or comes from a citywide strategic plan that we are in the midst of developing, which I'll also talk a little bit more about. And then I believe, that will be information that informs council as they go into their retreat in March. So the citywide work plan, our department priorities, and the strategic plan will be available as information for council as they go into the retreat. So I thought it would just be for since council is going to have this information, good awareness for our board members to have it within our department. So with that, I will kind of jump into it. I wanted to kind of provide this overview of the way that we kind of organize ourselves that might just be helpful in kind of understanding how we organize our work across the city and how it all kind of fits together. So you often kind of see things at the project planning phase, right, or program planning phase, but that's all feeding up to a lot of other, pieces of the work that have come together to get us to that point. And why setting our department priorities and our citywide strategic plan is so important, because it's what kind of sets the foundation and framework for the work that we're doing on a day-to-day basis. So I'm very excited about the citywide strategic plan. I know our staff teams are as well, just to have the intention around the citywide strategic plan is that we're all clear on what our city priorities are, and across all the departments, what it is that serves as our highest priorities, and then we're working towards that in our department plans. So our department plans will feed up to the citywide strategic plan. And then, of course, that all is kind of under the umbrella of the Boulder Valley Comp Plan, which is under the umbrella of the Sustainability, Equity, and Resilience Framework, which is how we really kind of it's like our guidepost in the way that we measure the work that we're doing. So we're getting just much more clear about how we set the foundation for our work and measure our outcomes for the entire city, not just us. I think, in the past, transportation has done a pretty good job with that, and I'll get to that in our later slides. But we're really trying to do that at a citywide level, and talk about the work that we're doing in terms of outcomes and metrics, and what are we achieving when it comes to the Sustainability, Equity, and Resiliency Framework. So there are 7 goal areas kind of under the framework, and our 2 really that transportation mobility live in are accessible, connected, and safe. And, as I said, we continue to be guided by our 2019 Transportation Master Plan and goals. This should look very familiar to you all. It's what continues to guide our work on a year-to-year basis, and is consistent with the SARE framework, and will be consistent with the citywide strategic plan as well. And then, as I said, we as a department have done a good job of really setting out kind of what our targets are and how do we measure whether or not we're meeting those targets over the years. You all probably remember our reports on progress that we do on a pretty 2 to 3 year basis. We'll be doing another one this year. Absent of that, and here's our kind of measurable objectives that they've been updated a little bit in the last, over the last TMP, but we've been fairly consistent over, decades in measuring some of these areas so that we are able to really track our progress. And then I just dropped in some information most recently, because we haven't done a report on progress in the last year. I thought it would be helpful to just highlight that. I'm sure you all saw this was from news releases that went out in the last month about both the Boulder Valley Employee Survey and the greenhouse gas inventory that the Climate Initiatives Department released. These are kind of the highlights, and really, I don't need to read through all this, but essentially, the takeaway is transportation emissions continue to be, one of the biggest areas where we're seeing increases. And, people are living further and further away from Boulder. The more people that are working in Boulder are non-residents, which means it's just more trips that are having to come in. Transit ridership is down. So you put all that together, and that leads you to, of course, we are probably not on track. Obviously, we haven't done a report on progress, but I can tell you it's probably going to be some yellow boxes. So that's all, I think, just helpful kind of context. That's what we continue to be, what's guiding the work that we're doing at a department level. And it's also what's guiding our work citywide, right? Like, because now those outcomes and metrics that we talk about in the TMP are going to be lifted up into the the larger kind of metrics that we're using as a city and how we prioritize our budgets and how we prioritize our work plans. What's most important? Where do we need to be putting our resources? So I think that's why, another reason why kind of I'm excited that we're just getting that kind of foundational work in place citywide. So now I'll kind of just focus in on the work that we're doing in 2024, our focus areas. Many of these are the same from the previous year. We have a couple areas that, you know, are a little, there's just more to them, I would say, a little more robust. Airport safety is obviously one that we talk more about recently, just given the conversations in the community around the airport. And our JEDI work is really being lifted up in all of our departments, and just requires our time and efforts. And it's important for us to highlight as a focus area for our department. And then as a department, we got together and really thought about what are our highest kind of project priorities for 2024. And I think most of these will probably not seem new to you or surprising. I don't expect you to be able to actually read the little Excel table or Smartsheets table that I dropped in here. It was really just an example of the way that we're doing kind of our citywide work planning. Is every department is putting their priority projects into the citywide work plan, and then that essentially becomes a dashboard for us to be able to track our progress citywide. And the bulleted list here are project priorities that we identified as a staff team for 2024. I think most of these are, you know, kind of they explain themselves. The one that I might just say on Boulder Social Streets 2.0, you all may recall the work that we did around Boulder Social Streets in 2023. Really, the vision for that is to kind of stand up a program within the city so that people, community can come to us, and if there's a desire to use our street space for just public pedestrian use or events or whatever the non-car use would be, there's a process by which they can do that. And so that in 2024 is a work item that multi departments will be working on to just start help a program take shape. And we heard that there was a continued interest by council for us to move in that direction through the 2024 budget cycle process. So that's on the list. And then I think the rest of these are pretty self-explainable. And that's all I have. So happy to take questions. I can put up the list if you had specific questions about what was up, but hopefully this was just helpful to kind of give just that broader context of the work that we're doing. And hopefully you kind of see the connection of the projects and programs that we bring to you on a monthly basis and how that all connects up to the bigger picture.
Thanks, Natalie. I have maybe a couple questions. Within CAN, the 3 first priority corridors included Baseline, Iris, Folsom. Is Folsom a little bit ways out because of the tip dollars associated with that?
That's correct. Yes. So, so I can see you. The Folsom project is the tip funds they begin in 2025, I believe. And Valerie or Garrett can correct me on that if I got it wrong. So that's slated in the 2025 work plan.
Okay, and then how about from CAN, the downtown street study?
Yeah, so we have that, and Valerie, jump in here if I misspeak, but we have that kind of plugged in for a late 24 possibility. I think that there's a high likelihood that could get, it kind of depends, right? Because we have the civic area phase 2 work that is kicking off or has kicked off. And it will, that could impact the kind of priority for the downtown mobility study from CAN. But I think the reality of it is we also have Safe Streets for All now. And that's going to just be hugely impactful on us, and obviously in a very exciting way, but also in a way that that's just going to drain resources. And so we need to, from a staffing perspective. And so we just need to be really thoughtful about, can we actually accomplish that? Because we have to start Safe Streets for All in it's going to be probably Q3, Q4, depending on the contracting around that. And so now we probably need to just think about balancing out our staffing resources.
Okay, good problem to have.
For sure.
Any other questions from Tab?
I had a question. Thank you for walking through that, Natalie. That's really helpful to see that all laid out. My question is, with this citywide strategic plan and everything kind of feeding up to it from different departments, do you expect there sort of to be a sort of ongoing process of, okay, well, now that all these plans are sort of integrating from different departments in perhaps a more extensive way, that then reverberates and affects in turn the plans for each of those departments to some extent? Or do you feel like that's not necessarily a likely outcome?
I think it's possible. I think right now what we're saying is that it probably, like right now, things aren't going to change, right? But I think as time goes on and some of these plans need to be updated, I think there's possibility for, just there will be more recognition of kind of citywide strategy, and making sure that the departments are consistent with citywide strategy. And I don't see that hugely impacting transportation, but I can see where it might in other departments. But time will tell, I think.
Okay. Great, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Trini, do you have anything?
Hold on. No, I can't find the button. Okay, sorry. I was unmuted the whole time. No, well, it's all super exciting. I'm, great problems to have, as you said, Alex, and yeah, I'm very, very happy, quite frankly.
Great. Well, thank you. And I think that wraps up our matters from staff tonight.
Yep, we'll go on to matters from the board. Only one thing made the agenda, at least before open board comment. Becky, you wanted this on here just as a placeholder, a minimum, but possibly to get a little more detail of the potential items for TAB to provide in a letter to City Council in advance of their agenda setting or their priority setting retreat. You want to say more about that?
Yeah, thanks. My understanding is that they will want the letters from boards to go to council before their retreat. And I thought, I don't know exactly the timeline, but I thought it would be good for us to start thinking about that now, to make sure that, we have enough, since we only have the meetings once a month and their retreat is sometime in March. February might be a good time for us to have a conversation in the meeting about what we want in that letter. So, yeah, I wanted to suggest that as something we plan for the February meeting. And then in the meantime, we each kind of think about what those things are that we think belongs in that letter, whether it's ordinance changes. I mean, there are certainly some things we've discussed in past meetings we can put there, but then, or if there's anything else that hasn't been considered, as well as things that might not be specific to ordinances, but rather general practices or priorities that we want to recommend to council. So I guess that'd be my suggestion, is that we talk about it at the February meeting so that we then have at least a few weeks after that to do the drafting part before it goes to council.
Becky, I take it you have a couple things in mind to include in that discussion.
And I should have asked, Natalie, do you have any updates on the overall timeline?
I haven't heard anything. Meredith, have you heard anything on council letters? No, nothing new.
Yeah, I don't know the timeline, but I do have a few items. I mean, certainly the off-street parking policy piece we can reiterate. And I've been tracking a number of things and I can send them to everyone before I think, I mean, I guess I think it would make sense for me to do, at least for the things I'm thinking of, is maybe email them to everyone so you all have a chance to look at it before the next meeting. I know we can't have a conversation about it. We won't do that, but just, and I'd welcome that from any of you if there's anything you want to send for any of us to consider prior to the next meeting so that we have a little time to just think about it before we discuss. That'd be great.
Thank you. Good idea. I have something to float for sure as well, so.
Yeah, I think everyone share it, maybe send it to yourself, BCC board, that way we don't set off a chain.
Yeah. And so we should, are we just saying we should carve out some time at the next meeting to talk about this as a group?
Yeah, we can plan out spending a good amount of time on that next month.
Thanks.
I don't see future agenda topics. There aren't any listed on our agenda for tonight's meeting. Natalie, you're not expecting it to be a much more robust agenda than it was tonight, are you?
No, I think it'll be probably a similar.
Okay. It's always good when we're not forming letters near midnight.
I have a question. So right now, since we're only 4, like I've never been part of the, I mean, it's just kind of a weird, when are we gonna get an additional member? Like, I don't remember what the cycle looks like.
Oh, so typically new boards and commission members are appointed in March. And so probably the first meeting in April is when we'll have our 5th member. Depending on the timing of that, I believe Alex will be here in March for our March meeting. And until then, we're just a 4-person board. So we still have a quorum of 3 people. We carry on like usual. And applications are open now for board applications, I think, until the end of January, and it's like January 29th or something like that.
Yeah. And then two new people will be seated in April.
2 new people will be seated.
Ryan's 2 remaining years, and then my seat will be over, and my term will be over, and my seat will be a full 5-year term to somebody else.
Oh, thank you. I'm gonna miss you.
Miss you guys. Okay, yeah, I think we've and we can probably tap into at our retreat last year we paired up, had some priorities, I think, dusting those off, sort of rehashing some of those conversations that we had a while ago. Maybe Trini, you and I, ours was supporting council on CAN. We have not done as much work as Becky has with the off-street parking reform. So I think with that one, we'll be very well situated to get that before council. Anything else about the letter? Looking forward to see what people come up in the coming weeks and the discussion next month. And then would welcome anything else under open matters from the board.
I had one more thing I wanted to speak to, which I meant to say in November, but was distracted with, it was possibly about Ryan's final meeting, and did turn out to be, so forgot to say. It was just that, how impressed I am with all the work on Baseline. I just think it's such a great project and such a great model of what's possible for the city when kind of everything aligns, when we have, the resources we need to do the work on a target area, and of course, the staff expertise to make it all happen, and the support from council and others to move it ahead. I just think it's a really great model for us to reference going forward. And I, enjoy the improvements in multiple modes of travel that I've done on that street, biking on it, driving on it. It feels safer really in each of those ways, walking on it. Yeah, and I love how wide the lanes are, the bike lanes are. That feels great. And especially the intersection work. I mean, given our conversation earlier tonight too, I think showing what could be done at those intersections and really how quickly a lot of this work has been done. It's just really, really great to see, and I think gives us, so much momentum going into other projects on the agenda. So yeah, just wanted to thank staff for all the great work on the baseline project.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. It was a huge accomplishment for the team, just how quickly they did it and just, you know, how unprecedented it was for the United States. And yeah, it's very, I mean, it was a bit of a miracle that they pulled off. And, you know, most people don't really understand that because of, you know, all the things that are happening in the background. And yeah, just really, we're all very proud of the team. So thanks.
Yeah, certainly got a lot of unsolicited feedback of people just being really impressed by it. I think it's exciting that it's coming in phases. So keep telling everyone like this is just the start. Like there's even more good stuff coming.
And the innovation with our protected bike lanes. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Anything else from the board tonight? I think we have our agenda meeting. Or Taylor, do you have something?
Nope.
Oh, okay, so I'm muted. I think we have our agenda meeting next Wednesday. So if anything comes to mind as far as future agenda topics, feel free to reach out to me. Try to get that on there. If nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn for the evening.
I move to adjourn.
I second it.
Thanks. All those in favor? Unanimous with 4 votes. All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
See you next month.
Good night.